"You're nice, Treasure, but I need someone more exciting." Treasure felt shattered. She had given everything, expecting love in return, but all she was left with was emptiness. For the first time, she questioned if being wife material was even worth it. Meet Treasure, a young woman who believes in love, loyalty, and the magic of devotion. Growing up in Lagos, Nigeria, Treasure was raised to be everything a good woman should be: dutiful, kind, and generous. And when she met her first love, everything seemed like a dream come true. It was at a family friend's party in Ikoyi that she first met Connor. He was charming, confident, and knew how to make her laugh. As they danced to Afrobeat music under the Lagos night sky, Treasure's heart felt a connection she'd never experienced before. Connor was quick to sweep Treasure off her feet. They shared late-night calls, walked along the Lekki Bridge, and promised each other the world. He told her he'd never met someone so giving, so ready to love. Connor began spending most of his time at Treasure's small apartment in Suralere. She cooked his favorite meals, made sure his clothes were neatly ironed, and even took care of him when he was sick. She didn't mind, she believed this was the start of their forever. But slowly, cracks began to show. Connor would cancel dates last minute, saying he was busy with work, but she would see him on social media out with friends. Treasure tried to ignore it, thinking, he's just going through a busy time. Determined to prove herself, Treasure went all out. She organized romantic dinners, cleaned his place, and even did his laundry. She thought, maybe if I show him I'm wife material, he'll see my worth and settle down. But Connor only seemed to grow colder. He would complain about her cooking, nitpick her habits, and started calling less often. Treasure felt like she was losing him, and with each passing day, her heart ached more. Her friends noticed her sadness. "Treasure, don't you see he's taking advantage?" they'd say. But she brushed them off, convinced that if she worked hard enough, he'd see her value. One evening, Treasure found out Connor was seeing someone else. He hadn't been working late, he'd been with her. Heartbroken, she confronted him, but he shrugged. "You're nice, Treasure, but I need someone more exciting." Treasure felt shattered. She had given everything, expecting love in return, but all she was left with was emptiness. For the first time, she questioned if being wife material was even worth it. Days turned into weeks, and the pain lingered. She thought of all the sacrifices she'd made, wondering why she'd been so willing to give up so much of herself. One night, she prayed, asking for guidance, clarity, and peace. She asked herself why she felt the need to prove herself worthy to someone who barely appreciated her. Her friends became her support system, helping her see her worth beyond Connor's approval. They reminded her that true love doesn't need to be earned by proving oneself, it's freely given. In her quiet moments, Treasure started journaling, putting down her dreams, her pain, and her desires for the future. She realized she'd lost herself in trying to be someone's ideal woman. Slowly, she began to rebuild. She found joy in little things, cooking for herself, exploring Lagos on her own, and rediscovering who she was before Connor. One evening, she deleted the last picture of Connor on her phone. It was time to let go, to move forward, to believe in her own worth again. Treasure felt a new kind of strength, one that wasn't tied to anyone's opinion. She no longer needed to prove herself, she simply wanted to be herself. The pain had taught her something valuable, that her love was a gift, not something to be taken for granted. She promised herself never to settle for less again. As months passed, Treasure found joy in herself. She was no longer wife material, she was just Treasure, and that was enough. This was just the beginning of her journey. Her heart, though scarred, was stronger, ready for whatever lay ahead. Treasure's story had only begun. After Connor, Treasure promised herself that she'd choose more wisely. So when she met Femi, a warm, attentive man with a gentle smile and big dreams, she thought maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Femi swept her off her feet with his sweet words and thoughtful gestures. They spent evenings strolling around Lekki, sharing their dreams. Treasure began to feel hopeful, letting her guard down one more time. It wasn't long before Femi started spending more time at Treasure's place. He'd show up with stories of his day, telling her she was the one person who truly understood him. And Treasure. She felt seen and needed. One evening, Femi told her about his financial struggles. His job wasn't paying him enough, and he'd been late on rent. Without hesitation, Treasure offered to lend him some money, happy to support her partner. As days turned to weeks, Treasure noticed that Femi had started depending on her for almost everything. His requests were small at first, a few naira here, a few there. But each request began to feel heavier. Femi's visits became more frequent. He ate most of his meals at her place, asked her to cover his phone bills, and even requested she help him with his laundry. Treasure complied, thinking, he'll repay me in love. Treasure began to feel a growing sense of unease. Every time she thought about saying no, Femi would remind her of how much he loved her kindness and how rare it was to find someone like her. So, she kept giving. Her friends noticed her change. "Treasure, this guy is just taking advantage of you," they warned. But Treasure believed Femi genuinely needed her support. She assured them it was only temporary. One night, as she looked over her dwindling bank balance, Treasure felt the weight of her decisions. She questioned whether Femi would do the same for her if the roles were reversed. Then came the day when Femi asked for a significant loan, saying he wanted to start a small business. Treasure was hesitant, but Femi reassured her, saying he'd pay her back as soon as he succeeded. Despite her doubts, Treasure transferred a large sum to Femi, telling herself that a good partner supports their loved one's dreams. She convinced herself that this was the right thing to do. Femi promised to make her proud, talking about their future together and how she'd always be his number one. Treasure's heart softened. She clung to his words, hoping this would be the turning point. Days turned into weeks, and Femi's visits became less frequent. He claimed he was busy with business matters, but something felt wrong. Treasure's calls went unanswered, and her messages read but ignored. Desperate for answers, Treasure went to Femi's house. He finally confessed that he wasn't ready for a serious commitment and had moved on. His words hit her like a thunderbolt, leaving her shattered. As Treasure walked home, she felt a deep sense of betrayal. She had poured everything into Femi, only to be used and discarded. The pain was unlike anything she had ever felt. In the weeks that followed, Treasure replayed their relationship in her mind, questioning how she had let herself be used. She felt foolish, embarrassed, and angry at her own trusting heart. Treasure confided in her closest friends, who offered comfort and helped her see that her worth was not tied to how much she could give to others. She realized that love isn't about giving everything until there's nothing left. It's about mutual support, respect, and balance. And in this relationship, she had been the only one giving. Day by day, Treasure began to rebuild herself. She spent more time with loved ones, rediscovered her hobbies, and slowly started to feel whole again, no longer defining herself by the relationship she had lost. Treasure learned a valuable lesson from Femi, to never allow herself to be undervalued again. She promised herself that she'd never give more than she received and would always remember her own worth. Treasure had just gotten over Femi when she met Twon-dey, a man who could make the dullest room shine with his smile. He was charismatic, confident, and had a way of making her feel like the only woman in the world. Twon-dey wasted no time. "You are the most stunning woman I've ever seen," he said the moment he approached her. His voice was smooth, and his eyes locked on hers. Treasure felt butterflies she hadn't felt in a long time. Their first date felt like a dream. Twon-dey brought her flowers, pulled out her chair, and spent the evening complimenting her intelligence and beauty. He said all the right things, and Treasure couldn't help but be smitten. In the following weeks, Twon-dey showered Treasure with gifts, perfumes, dresses, and even a necklace. Each gift came with words sweeter than honey. Treasure felt special, as though she had finally found a man who valued her. Treasure introduced Twon-dey to her friends. They were impressed by his charm but cautious. "Be careful, Treasure," they said. "Sometimes, sweet words hide bitter truths." But Treasure waved them off, convinced Twon-dey was different. Twon-dey painted a vivid picture of their future together. "Imagine our wedding in Dubai, our kids running around in a beautiful home," he'd say. Treasure found herself dreaming of the life he described. Then came the small favors. "Babe, can you help me pay for this business meeting? Or I'm a little short on cash for fuel." Treasure didn't mind at first. He was building their future, wasn't he? Twon-dey began to call her less, except when he needed something. Treasure noticed the shift but told herself he was just busy. "He loves me," she reminded herself, brushing away her doubts. Twon-dey always had grand plans. "We'll travel the world, Treasure. But I need you to invest in me first." The more Treasure gave, the bigger his dreams became. And the smaller her savings grew. Treasure started noticing inconsistencies. Twon-dey's stories didn't always add up, and his promises began to feel hollow. But every time she confronted him, he'd flash that smile and say, "Don't you trust me?" Her friends grew more vocal. "Treasure, this guy is a smooth operator," they said. But Twon-dey had a way of making Treasure feel like they were just jealous of their love. Twon-dey's requests became more frequent and demanding. One day, he asked Treasure to co-sign a loan for him. She hesitated, and for the first time, Twon-dey's tone turned cold. "I thought you believed in me," he said. Treasure did some digging. To her horror, she discovered Twon-dey had been seeing other women, spinning the same sweet words, making the same promises. She realized she was just another name on his list. Treasure confronted Twon-dey. At first, he denied it, but when pressed, his mask slipped. "You're too emotional," he sneered. His words cut deep, shattering the fantasy she had built around him. Treasure ended it. Twon-dey didn't even try to fight for her. "Your loss," he said, walking out the door without a backward glance. For Treasure, it was a bitter pill to swallow. For weeks, Treasure felt numb. She replayed every moment, questioning how she had fallen for his lies. Slowly, she began to accept that it wasn't her fault, it was his deceit. Treasure realized that words without actions are meaningless. She vowed never to let someone's charm blind her to the truth again. Treasure immersed herself in work and hobbies, finding joy in the little things. She leaned on her friends, who reminded her of her strength and worth. Each day, Treasure grew stronger. She no longer longed for Twon-dey's empty promises. Instead, she focused on building a future filled with genuine love, starting with herself. Treasure moved on, wiser and stronger. Twon-dey was just another lesson on her journey, and she was ready to keep walking, her head held high.